Hello everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be looking at indeterminate equations. These are very, very important and are always used in higher math. It's so significant that I think more than like 15% of the advanced math questions, the unsolvable math questions, do involve equations like these. Yeah, so let's go right into it. Follow along. I do strongly recommend that you have a notebook on your own and that you follow these notes in your own way. Yeah, so let's look at indeterminate equations. And this is part 1. Okay, so what is an indeterminate equation? Well, an indeterminate equation is basically when you cannot determine the value of the variables in your equation. So a determinate one is something that you see easily, something like x plus 3 equals 5. Then, x is the only variable here, and so you can figure out what x is. X is 2. But in a indeterminate case, you have x and y, for example, and then you have 5. And then you're like, oh, well, x could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 0.007, it could be 5.992, it could be, 100,000 million, and it would still have a y value because, y can be a negative number, it can be 0.992, it can be minus this to get 5. I won't even attempt to do that. But the point is that when you have more variables than the number of equations, this becomes an indeterminate. Because, for example, if we had another equation given with this, if we were given, for example, x plus y equals 3, and then x minus y equals 2, then we would be able to figure this out because we are given two relationships, and then you can, for example, add these two, and then you would get 2x equals 5, and then you can subtract these two, and then you'd get, for example, let's say negative 2x, 2y equals 1. So this is how you would get it. So an indeterminate case is really when you have more variables than equations. Practically, this is the definition we will go for. Okay, then how do you solve indeterminate equations? And that's kind of funny because the reason it's called indeterminate is because you cannot solve it. It's unsolvable. There are just so many numbers. And so what mathematicians will do is they'll give a caveat. They'll say, oh, x has to be, for example, x has to be a natural number. X has to be an integer. X has to be in between these two numbers. It has to be between 3 and 5, and it has to be a multiple of 4, for example. So these are the kind of caveats that mathematicians will introduce in order to solve these. Okay, so let's look into some practice questions. So we'll jump right into a lot of the harder things. Yeah, let's get right into it. So let's say x plus y equals 3. And x and y are both integers. Yeah. Find x that is in between 0 and 3. And then you're going to be like, oh, that's too easy. Well, if x is an integer, then we have x is 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then we have y accordingly. We have y equals 3, y equals 2, y equals 1, and y equals 0. That's too easy. Okay. And then let's go to a harder one. What about x squared plus y squared? How does that sound to you? Well, x squared plus y squared is basically, it's basically, what is it? Is it, let's say it's 5, and then x and y are both integers. And then you're like, oh, well, that's interesting because, I can't put numbers like, oh, let's just say 7 for this sake. I can't put numbers like 3 in y because that would be 9, and this can't be a negative number unless x is a imaginary number. X squared cannot be negative. And so, that means, both of our numbers have to be less than 9, right? That's what happens because, you can't put 3 into any of them. So they have to be x squared and y squared have to be smaller than y, not equal to, smaller than y. So x and y have to be smaller than 3. Let's say x and y are natural numbers, actually. Okay, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so what can x and y be? Well, they can be 0, 1, or 2. Okay, this is making sense. So now if I just start with x and then I go 0, 1, 2, what can I have for y? Well, if I put 0 in there, y squared has to be 7, and that can't happen if y is a natural number, so this does not exist. If x squared is 1, then that does not exist either because y squared has to be 6. And if x is 2, that also cannot exist because y squared has to be 3. And so none of these actually stand. Okay, that's not good. That no bueno. Let's do another one. Let's go back to a very simple idea. Let's do 3 variables. X plus y plus z is 7. No, let's do even smaller. 4. And x, y, and z are natural numbers. Oh my gosh, then well, I can't put numbers like 5 in here because these two cannot be negative, and I can't put 4 because these two would be 0, right? And that goes not only for x but also for y and z. And so, the highest that I can put in is it 3? Well, if I put 3 in here, then one of them has to be 1, but then this has to be 0, and we said it's a natural number. It cannot be 0. So let me see. Then it has to be 2, 1, 1. That's the only possible option. What else is there? Can I do... Yeah, that's the only possible option, right? Because if I go 1, then, another one has to have 2. None of them can be 0. And so this is our only option. So the only possible ordered pair would really be oh no, sorry, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 1. So these are the only possible options. Okay, great. Yeah, we looked over some of what indeterminate equations are so far. And if this is a beginner course that you're watching, then I will cut you off here. Thank you so much for listening, and let's move on